Firstly, thank you for joining us live. For everybody else that's watching the recording, thank you for signing up online as well. We're going to spend some time today going through what has essentially become the proposition for deviation, and it's essentially how I see the future of search going. It's happening right now. It's going to happen over the next 12 to 18 months as well. So yeah, let's get into it. For those that are new to deviation or haven't really followed the journey of what deviation is and how it's come about, essentially we are the Search Everywhere agency. And what I mean by this is we're essentially an agency that empowers Gen Z, millennial-focused brands. We spark meaningful conversations and we forge authentic relationships with audiences across all search platforms. So it's essentially moving beyond Google. Our objectives are always to improve organic traffic. We're looking to improve brand awareness, and we're always looking to promote consistent growth, and we're doing that within engaged communities. The result of this tactic, the result of this technique, and hopefully what we're going to get into within this webinar is that deviation, and by proxy of learning this process, you guys can drive unrivaled value for your brands. To narrow that down, ultimately, we specialise in social search. We're getting brands visibility, we're generating that advocacy, and ultimately leading to the growth of revenue within target audiences and communities within the emerging search universe. So welcome guys, I can see we've got a few people joining. You haven't missed any of the good stuff. This is just me giving the overview of what deviation is. So as I say, you haven't missed a great deal. So the only way to make meaningful change and the only way to do this search everywhere proposition is to deviate from the path. And what I mean by this is it's time for us to break down silos in marketing teams. So we have brand, we have social, and typically we have SEO teams within brands. Now more than ever, it's time that brand teams, social teams, and SEO teams looked to work as a collective as opposed to these siloed units that they have been previously. This has prevented brands from adopting truly holistic approaches in the past, where brand teams would get precious over brand elements, SEO teams get precious over SEO elements. We need to move past that. We need to grow up a little bit. And the result of doing that will be that we can deviate from what's been the norm and we can start to make meaningful change in how we deliver search marketing. So we as an agency, we try to do that. That's where the name Deviation came from. Hopefully that all makes sense and we'll start getting into it now. So that's enough about the agency. A little bit about me. I'm Liddell. I'm the co-founder at Deviation. It's great when you can give yourself a title, so I've gone with Creative Strategy Director, and we'll see how that goes over the next 12 months, but that's what we've gone with to start off with. I'd say, to give a little bit of a background, in terms of search everywhere, in terms of that social search conversation, I've been talking about this since late 2021. Early 2022. My first blog on the topic was published on the Content Marketing Association website. Essentially, I've worked on big brands, I've worked on little brands, I've worked within network agencies, and I've worked within a thriving or a really strong independent agency. And during my time at those agencies, social search and shouting about the potential of search everywhere has been a real talking point for me. Aside from those sort of 5 years where I've worked directly in agencies, I've been around SEO and marketing for a long time. My first exposure of it actually really quickly was for a brand that I'd developed, which was going to be a supplements company around the time that I was a personal trainer. And this was a time when you could keyword stuff in sort of e-commerce and things. So yeah, back in the good old days, a lot of SEOs would say. So now we're ready to basically take my entrepreneurial spirit and itchiness, match that with a knowledge of social search, and we're launching Deviation, and I'm going to share some of that knowledge with you now. So we are at the future of search. We are crafting our search universe. Today, we're going to talk about this as a topic. I'm hopefully going to educate some of you guys on what social search means, what the potential of that is for your brand. And we're going to get into our agencies as well, because I know we've had a lot of agencies sign up to this, how they can start to embrace that search universe, embrace everything that comes with that to deliver truly holistic search everywhere strategies. We've got a bit of an agenda to go with this, okay? So hopefully you can see the way I've gone with this and the thought process behind it. But we're going to start with defining our search universe. So I'm going to explain exactly what I mean by a search universe, how that's happened, why that's happening, and what's facilitating this shift. We're going to continue by looking at how we develop a strategy. And then after we've developed that strategy, that's when we'll sort of take a recess, get a drink, and we can discuss and have some Q&A. So definitely feel free to drop some questions within the Q&A section of this. Drop them into the comments section or the chat if not, and we'll come back to them for a 10-minute sort of recess. People can grab a drink, etc. And then we'll go from there. From there, we'll go into Discover, and that's where we're going to talk about discovering trends, discovering search everywhere, how we can embrace this change, embrace search everywhere to develop and deliver for our brands. And then that'll tie nicely in how we measure that delivery, how we look at data, we look at analytics, and we look at how we're measuring our strategy to essentially make CMOs happy with what we're doing from a search everywhere standpoint. And then, as we did earlier, we'll have a chance to discuss these two sessions, or these two sections, I should say, afterwards. So hopefully that's all good. If that all makes sense and everyone's ready to go, I can see that we've had some more people join. Feel free to give me a yes in the chat. Make sure the audio is all right for everyone. Make sure the video and the presentation's all right. I'll give people a minute just to shout yes in the chat, and then we'll get going. If you've just joined, hello, Ashley, co-founder at Deviation. We're going to talk you through search everywhere, social search, and what that means for your brands and your agencies moving forward. We're not going to waste any more time. We're going to get straight into it. Okay, so defining a search universe. When I sort of started to think about the phrases that we was going to use at Deviation, search universe really came to us quite quickly. And what I like to do when I'm developing these phrases is come up with sort of dictionary definitions. So what would it look like if it was in the dictionary? Because I feel like that's a great place to sort of start in understanding what the term means. So for this specifically, we've got the various digital platforms that are leveraged by brands, marketing teams within a holistic approach to search marketing. Straight, nice to the point. The context of this being a universe suggests that there's an importance or there's a cohesive cross-channel presence and interconnectivity. So the key points there are it's a holistic approach to search that moves search beyond Google. To sort of take that into an actionable or take that into what that actually means for our strategies, it's getting content in front of audiences in a way that engages on the platforms that our users are actually spending time browsing. So it's looking at the touch points that our users are taking at various stages of the search journey and ensuring that our brands are delivering content on those platforms when users are taking a search on that platform, for the reason that they're taking a search as well. Whether it's inspire, whether it's discover, whether it's to make a purchase, we need to make sure that our brands are there when they're actually ready to engage with that content on that platform. And the reason for this is that a search journey, well, it used to mean just Google. I think traditionally, yes, there were alternatives. You had the likes of Bing, but for most SEO search journeys, it all meant Google. Now, in 2024, and probably since early 2023, the bottom line that you can see on your screen, that's a more accurate picture. So we're seeing lots of platforms enter the conversation. The obvious ones are Reddit. We've seen that enter traditional Google SERPs, and we've seen users turn to Reddit within their search journeys and their discovery journeys. Pinterest, massive inspiration platform. Users are turning to Pinterest for inspire queries all the time. TikTok, that's one that's getting all the attention, and I'd say that's the key one that's driving this change in terms of the mainstream, especially within some audiences that we're going to get into in a moment. But that's the one that's getting all the attention, I'd say. But there's other platforms as well. So you've got things like Snapchat, you've got things like Discord that I believe are going to enter the conversation. Discord for gaming queries especially, that's going to be huge. And Snapchat with Gen Z, millennial audiences, again, that's already showing signs that that's going to be a key platform for brands to deploy content on and work with content creators upon. And the reason or the outcome of this is that in a world where we're searching everywhere, attention is everything. So we need to be demanding that. And that means that it's not good enough to just be on Google anymore. You need to be leveraging these platforms, leveraging these touch points and be present upon those. Because if you're not, your users are going to be. And that's going to lead, your competitors are going to be, and they're going to meet your users' queries. And that means that they're going to gain that market share, gain that share of search across this search universe. And as we'll get into throughout this presentation, that's going to lead to them gaining market share and gaining share of search where it matters on a traditional search SERP when users are ready to convert. So who are the ones driving this? Well, Gen Zs and millennials are the ones that have initiated this big bang. They're the ones that are causing all the aggro. They're the ones that are leading this change. We've got some stats here. I'd say probably everybody in SEO has seen that one on the right now, around 40% of young people, blah, blah, blah. That's done the rounds now since probably 2022, I think. But what we're now seeing is that there's actually more and more studies that are coming out to support that viewpoint. So Google coming out and acknowledging that actually when people are looking for a place for lunch, they're looking for restaurant advice, they're not going to Google Maps or search, they're heading to TikTok or Instagram. That was sort of the spark, and then we've started to see a shift happen over the past 12 months, and now other publishers, other brands are starting to explore this further, and we're starting to get insights like what you can see on the other side of the screen. So you've got 41% of users have admitted to using TikTok for search purposes, and the other stats that you can read on your screen at the moment. And they're sort of giving me the indication to say, actually, this is a shift that's happening at pace, and if this is already happening after, I'd say, 12 to 24 months of it becoming mainstream, what's that going to look like in 5 years? What's that potentially going to look like in 10 years? And that's what led me to sort of develop this proposition and ultimately share it with you guys now. But it's okay having the knowledge that this is happening, but we need to get into the crux of why it's happening and what's actually facilitating this. So yes, Gen Z and millennials are the ones starting this shift, but why? Why are they moving away from a Google SERP? Well, it's easy really. It's because of the democratisation of search, and you can see this happening for various reasons that are listed on the screen and that we're going to get into now. So you've got community-driven search marketing. Traditional SERPs are filled with brands, they're filled with publishers, filled with news sites. And it's very hard for users at a user level to sort of break into that SERP and to understand how they need to rank on a Google SERP. I'd say that there's quite a high barrier to entry in terms of gaining a number one ranking piece of content for certain queries. Whereas on a TikTok, on a Reddit, on a Pinterest, it's much more community driven. It's much more easy for users to enter that conversation and infiltrate that conversation. And what that means is that users are actually able to contribute to the search marketing queries. They're able to contribute to the SERPs, and that's leading to that democratization of search as a result. On the back of UGC, on the back of users sort of contributing to the search landscape, content creators and influencers are beginning to recognize the potential of this as well. So instead of it being a brand-led conversation or a publisher-led conversation, all of a sudden search on TikTok, on Instagram, on Reddit becomes a content creator-led conversation, and influencers are able to lead that conversation as well. And we'll get into a little bit of the why as we go through this. Social media platforms are able to offer really personalized user experiences, okay? So the social media algorithms of a TikTok, of an Instagram, they're able to deliver content that users have a big interest in. So if I watch content on the Olympics, TikTok knows that I'm interested in that, and it's more likely to show me content on the Olympics in the future, which leads to really personalized user experiences as a result. It keeps me in the platform, and one of the big advantages that it leads to is essentially brands, through creators, through user-generated content, through employee-generated content, they're able to get content that's typically reserved for search marketing in front of audiences before they take a search, and that's really, really powerful. And then finally, we've got the EAT sort of factors. What do I mean by this? Eats a Google sort of conversation. Why is that coming up in the democratization of search? Well, actually, social platforms are able to hit those factors, that experience, that first-hand experience, displaying expertise, sort of showing authority and generating trust on the back of that. That's possible on social search platforms a lot easier, and it can be manufactured a lot easier than it can for a lot of brands on a typical piece of blog content. So if we've got a UGC piece of content, it's hard to deny that there's first-hand experience there. If we've got a content creator who's got a strong following within the community or within the industry of a brand, it's hard to deny that they've got the experience and therefore the expertise to discuss that topic. And then finally, as a result of having those two, they're generating that authoritativeness, and then as a result, getting trustworthiness within the space. So what is actually a Google acronym and something that SEOs have leaned into for traditional SEO is really possible on social platforms and across social search, which again is sort of facilitating that democratization of search. And that's all well and good. I can give you the audiences that are leading the way. I can tell you what's facilitating that, but it's important to grab an example and talk about an example. So, as you can see on the screen, we've got a search universe here. We've got Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube, and Google. And the example that I've leaned on, and one that I've discussed previously, is Sephora. Now, I can talk about this probably in its own webinar, in all honesty, so I'm going to try and be brief with this. But essentially, Sephora noticed a community issue, a pain point of their audience around when users were searching for black beauty on a Google SERP, they were greeted with a film about a horse, as opposed to receiving content around black cosmetics, black beauty brands, black hair brands, and all of the things that social search was actually delivering on. So Sephora, through their partnerships with black-owned brands, which they increased, through working with more and more content creators, through encouraging UGC and EGC at the time, they were able to sort of influence that conversation and make Google take notice and start to change that SERP around that query. So yeah, check this one out. As I say, I've done loads and loads of posts about this in the past, but the Sephora example is a really good example of how something that was picked up on traditional search was amplified across social search platforms with community at the center of it, with UGC, with content creators at the heart of it, that led to this social search growth. The results of this really quickly was something crazy like a 700% increase in search, and then massive developments in revenue. So this was a really strong case study for Sephora in terms of developing and building their community, but also getting the stuff that we're looking for in terms of increasing search, development of share of search, and development of revenue as well. There we go, I didn't think it was going to click through then. And then we've got more examples. So we've got Lux Collective, who are absolutely smashing their socials at the minute, it's fair to say. Not just TikTok Live, but also their existing sort of feed content on the TikTok platform is really good at sort of saying, this is what you should be looking for in this style of bag, this is what you should be looking for from this brand of bag. And they're really meeting the needs of their users on a TikTok SERP as opposed to doing it on a traditional SERP. You've got Charlotte Tilbury, who's got a really strong sort of community of creators, of people going out their way to talk about that brand. And then you've got Gymshark and Gymshark 66, which is an absolute monster of a campaign, in fairness, and again could be talked about on its own for hours. But again, that Gymshark content, leaning on user generated content, but putting the brand at the heart of a pain point in terms of developing good habits at the start of the year over 66 days so that you can change your lifestyle. So all these brands, Cortez, Represent, Gymshark, Charlotte Tilbury, they're already acknowledging that community, UGC, content creators needs to be at the heart of our marketing, and they're doing so with search at the core. Okay, so that's setting the scene essentially for hopefully justifying why we need to be taking social search everywhere, and crafting that search universe seriously. Hopefully that explains what that search universe is and what I mean by that term. What I'd like for us to do at the moment is, before we move on, if you've got any questions that you've thought about while we've been going through that session or section, now's the time to get them in the chat. Now's the time to get them in the Q&A, because once we've gone through this section, we're going to come back to those questions. So while they're fresh in your head, before we move on, get them in the Q&A, get them in the comments, and we'll come back to them after this section. So I'm just going to get another drink and then we'll move on. And also, while we're at it, if you want to drop a yes in the chat, if all that makes sense and that's all good, that'd be awesome as well. I'd like to see that in the chat too, please. As I say, we can come back to discussing the points around that in the Q&A in a few minutes' time. Amazing. Yeah, thumbs up's great. Cheers, Adam. Thumbs up would be awesome. Yeah, that's great. Okay. We've had a drink. We can get moving on. Fly's doing my head in. Just chasing it around. Yeah. Okay, so this is now starting to look at how we develop a search everywhere strategy. So that's going to be the focus of this next sort of 5-10 minutes of discussion. This is the deviation flywheel. So what I've done is, as I've built the foundations of our agency up and developed what our proposition is going to be, I've sort of developed this flywheel as we've gone, and this has become the foundation of everything that we do. The focus for this section of the talk is to look at analysis, a search universe analysis, and how we develop that into a holistic search strategy. Obviously, the idea of this being a flywheel is that the more we do of each of these pieces, the faster that flywheel goes and the better the return on investment is, or the better the results are, the more the results are for the brands that we work with. So we're going to get into it now. We're focusing on analysis, search universe analysis, and a holistic search strategy. Okay, so benchmarking, that analysis point at the top. It's really important before we get into platforms, before we're getting into the search universe itself, it's really important that we establish our key competitors. This is the stuff that SEO teams are probably more familiar with in terms of how they're developing content strategies for traditional SEO. There's a lot that's borrowed from that process here. But for brand teams and social teams, this is slightly different to their processes. So we need to establish key competitors. We need to understand who is playing ball in the space. And if we can start to do that, we're understanding the search everywhere landscape. So whether that's fashion brand X's competitor are really good on Pinterest, they're really good on TikTok, but they're quite poor on Instagram, or whether that's understanding that fashion brand Y don't have a TikTok, don't have an Instagram, so therefore there's an opportunity for us to get a leg up on that competitor. These are all things that we can establish through benchmarking. As a result of understanding those key competitors and beginning to sort of establish the search everywhere landscape in terms of who's playing ball where, we can start to define strategic goals. So the idea here is we can understand, okay, well actually I need to be growing share of search versus these key competitors in order to win in my search strategy this year. Success might look like developing share of search versus these key competitors. For one brand that we're working with, especially at the moment, it's that shift of we're doing really well against this group of competitors, but this other group of competitors are quite a way ahead of us. So whilst we're doing really well against these, our attention now needs to look upwards to the next sort of group of competitors, if you like, the next stage of competitors. So it's about closing the gap on those competitors. That's what our benchmarking is going to tell us. Essentially, we're able to use this to build the narrative of what's going to come from our holistic search strategy and what the focus is going to be from our search universe analysis. The narrative here is what's the story. So you might have seen a post that I posted on LinkedIn if you follow me. Essentially, what's the story, Morning Glory, big Oasis fan, can't help it. I always have to make those sort of references. But by establishing the story, that's going to make those next two stages that we're about to get into so much easier. And as well, data on its own is essentially useless. We need to have that narrative. We need to have that story to make sense of the data that we're going to be discovering over the next two stages. Okay. This click button's really letting me down. There we go. All right. So in terms of some examples, again, the SEOs amongst us, these types of graphs, some of these will be really obvious, some of them maybe not so. So I've included these just to give us an idea to get you thinking about what potential benchmarking examples are. I'm sure that within your brands, within your agencies, there are metrics that you turn to in terms of understanding the landscape. You still can leverage them, absolutely, but here's some that we look at. So we're looking at brand trend performance. We're then looking at global trend performance and heat mapping that onto the global map versus competitors. We're looking at a brand popularity channel breakdown. So we're basically taking a channel breakdown, running our brand terms through that channel breakdown and understanding where we're over-indexing, under-indexing, or maybe where our presence is neutral. We've then got share of search by channel. So currently we can do share of search on TikTok, we can do share of search on traditional search, and we can do share of search on YouTube. So that's what those three sort of colours are on that bar chart that you can see. We've got backlink profiling versus competitors, and then finally good old visibility index as well. So hopefully the point around the data, it's not to show the data here, that's not important. It's just to give you some examples of what can go into that benchmarking stage so that you can be ready to start your search universe analysis. Again, I've done lots of posts on different examples of benchmarking metrics, so definitely check out my LinkedIn posts. Cheeky plug again. And we're following it up with another shameless plug. That's quite funny. So what we're going to be getting into over the next sort of 2-3 minutes is that search universe analysis point. I want to take a bit of a whistle-stop tour. So get a picture of the QR code and go to follow the link now. Obviously, I'm sending this deck out afterwards as well, so feel free to look later. But I've essentially documented the entire process of undertaking a search universe analysis from beginning to end. So I don't need to go through that here because I've done a blog on it previously. We're going to take a whistle-stop tour now and look at the ideologies of undertaking a SUA. But essentially, check out that blog if you want to know how to do this process from beginning to end. Okay, so search universe analysis. This is, again, something that we've developed as Deviation and something that we want to take sort of forward with what we do. Chino, can you put me on charge, please?
Yes.
Is that all right? So we're looking to understand our audience, we're looking to understand our channels, and we're looking to understand activations. Insights into how your target audience behave across the various search platforms, they include social search platforms, and throughout their decision-making process. When we look at channels, we're looking at where they're playing ball. So where users are heading, where the industry is particularly popular. So again, fashion, if we use that as an example, we know Instagram, Pinterest and TikTok tend to be the channels that are popular within that industry. So we can go and deep dive, we can look at the characteristics, we can look at the functions of what content needs to look like on those channels, and we can understand how we can leverage those channels within our SUA. And then finally, there's the idea of understanding activations. So this is where we're looking at existing UGC, we're looking at existing content creators within the space, we're looking at existing brands that are playing ball within the space, and we're looking at what activations could look like, how we could repurpose content and take it from a TikTok and leverage that on a YouTube short, and all of these other considerations around how we actually deliver on the needs of our search strategy across an emerging search universe. So hopefully that makes sense. As I say, the idea of creating this SUA, check out the blog, there's a thorough process breakdown, but that's essentially the ideologies of what we're trying to get when we conduct an SUA. But why do you want to leverage an SUA? Why is that different to anything else that we do? Well, for a start, for SEO teams, it allows us to look beyond Google. So as I mentioned, we're looking at the different platforms that users and brands and the landscape are telling us are important to our audience and therefore should be important to our brand. And essentially we get to look beyond Google in what we're doing. We're getting to do so in a really data-driven way. So we're not just going and looking at the content, but we're also looking at the data that supports that content. We're looking at hashtag views, we're looking at searches per month with sort of search volumes for TikTok and YouTube, and these sort of data points that are typical of a traditional search strategy. We're starting to leverage them within a search universe analysis instead of just a one-channel breakdown. A really good point is that we can understand search behaviors. And this leads into that persona specific search journeys point as well, but we're able to understand which platforms users are turning to at the various stages of their search journey. Is it that they're heading to Pinterest to get inspired and then they go straight to a Google SERP and conduct a brand search and convert a really nice and easy search journey? Is it that actually it's a little bit more thorough, so people are turning to TikTok to get a review or an unboxing of a product, they're then heading to Reddit to get user feedback and reviews of that product, then they're heading to a Google SERP and looking at further reviews, blog reviews of that content, maybe heading to a YouTube and checking somebody out like a Marcus Brownlee to see if they've made any comments on that product before ultimately taking that brand search on a Google SERP and buying. These are all things that we can sort of develop from an SUA, understanding those behaviors and then plotting that as a persona specific search journey. So what I mean by this is if we know that Gen Zs are typically going to go TikTok, YouTube, TikTok, Google, we can plan that out and deliver content specifically targeting those users in that order across that journey. If we're speaking to boomers, it might be that boomers check out a Facebook group, then they check out a YouTube video, and then they go to a Google. So the idea of creating these sort of individualistic search journeys for a persona across that search universe is quite powerful as well. Essentially, all 4 of these points are going to allow us to effectively inform a 2024 strategy, which we can get onto in a moment. And then really quickly, the process of sort of developing that SEO. So this is what the blog breaks down in loads and loads of detail and breaks down how to do it. But essentially, we start with platform overviews and discovery. We're going to analyse the platform's emergence. We're going to look at the core functionality, any algorithmic considerations that we have to make for that platform. And we want to understand its impact on the brand, on the industry that we're in, and how content ranks and what the potential is for content ranking on that platform. The second stage around the platform's role within the search landscape. We're identifying the platform's role in the user journey here. We're looking at inspiration, discovery, is it purchase? We're then trying to comprehend the potential touch points our users are taking within that journey. Competitor strategy discovery. So we've done a bit of this within the benchmarking, and that can absolutely come as part of this SEO and be lifted into the SEO. But essentially, we're taking it a little bit further. We're looking to evaluate competitor strategies across the universe. Is there any examples of brands that are doing things holistically already? Is there examples of brands leveraging a TikTok, a Discord, a Reddit? We're basically looking for how that's working across the search landscape. We're looking at creator partnerships here as well. Reason for this is when we're developing creator relationships, and we're going to come on to this in more detail in a second, but it's really important that it feels authentic and it doesn't feel forced. If a creator has worked with one of your key competitors in the last 3 or 6 months, it might be that you don't want to work with them because it's not going to look like they're an authentic user of your brand or an advocate of your brand. It more looks like they're an advocate of every brand within the space, which might not be a good look for your brand. If we're looking for those loyal fans and we're looking for people that are going to shout about our brand, it might be that we look to work with creators that don't work with competitors. So essentially, that's the part of the process here in terms of that competitor strategy discovery. It's looking at what they're doing, who they're working with, and where they're producing content. Reason being, we can identify quick wins, we can look at that competitive landscape and know where we want to play ball. Emerging trends, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we've got a full section of this talk that's going to look at that element of this, but essentially we're able to assess current, emerging, historical trends, understand what gains traction, what's previously gained traction, and how that can be leveraged within our search strategy to basically gain a competitive advantage and drive brand value. Second to last, we're nearly there, platform-specific content strategy considerations. So here, we're looking to investigate the types of content that have success within the platforms that we've decided will be part of our search universe or search everywhere strategy. So as you've gone through the previous 4 steps, as you get here, you're now starting to understand where you need to be playing ball. So then you can look at what content works, what content doesn't work, and essentially make sure that you're going to be creating content that does work as opposed to the stuff that doesn't. And then finally, it's about those cross-channel opportunities. One of the big sort of early stumbling blocks we had with Search Everywhere is that it's actually a lot more expensive than traditional search content because you're not just creating the blog, you're going out your way to work with creators, you're driving UGC, you're doing all of this social video content. It can become expensive. However, if there's cross-channel opportunities so that you can dilute the cost across a TikTok, a YouTube, and Instagram, all of a sudden the return on investment of that one piece of content becomes so much more widespread, which makes it more affordable as a result. So yeah, we're looking for repurpose opportunities to sort of maximize the value of our content across that search universe. Okay, so then on the back of this, we start to emerge with a strategy. We're now looking at sort of how we can tie in our creator-led activations, how we can tie in UGC, and how we can be proactively reactive to that strategy and making those considerations as we go. Oh, there we go. So, trying these creator-led research methods. So in terms of understanding who we want to be working with, what the content needs to be that we're producing, and how we can be proactive, reactive, there's a lot of things that go into that as we're starting to emerge with a strategy. SEOs will be happy to hear that it starts with keyword research, or you might be unhappy to hear it depending on how much keyword research you've done over the years. But essentially, we want to go beyond traditional keyword research here. So we're getting our keyword research from a SEMrush, from an Ahrefs. Typically, everybody's going to have the same access to that data. We all use the same tools as SEOs, which means we're all getting the same keywords. One way for us to differentiate this is to then head into the social search platforms, take a look at what's going on across that sort of social search landscape, and we can start to map keywords that are emerging on TikTok, keywords that are emerging on Instagram, Reddit, Discord, and all these other platforms, and we can map those to the ones that we know driving search traffic on a traditional SERP. The idea of this then is that we can understand, okay, if I create content on this pillar topic, I need to include these keywords within a blog. I need to include these keywords within a TikTok content, these hashtags within TikTok, Instagram content. And essentially, we have the beginnings of our brief there just on the back of our research. One thing that we have got you for everyone on this webinar is that we can share a template on how we do that. So I'll drop that into your inboxes after this session with a little breakdown of the steps that we take to essentially do keyword research and keyword mapping. Related to that keyword mapping is that social listening element. So essentially what we can do here is we can look at social search because it enables us to constantly be connected with our community and our audience and our content creators in the space. So let's go and check the comments on social content. Let's go check Reddit. Let's go check the feedback that our creators received in their comment section on their content. And let's take content inspiration from there. Are there any questions that creators are being asked around get ready with me content or a certain style of fashion product? Again, if we're leaning on that fashion example that we've seen to lean on throughout this talk. Essentially, we can start to get content inspiration from there and use that against our keyword research as well. A really good one that we've leveraged since we started is creator interviews. So when we've developed those working relationships with creators for our brands, we've asked the creator if we can jump on a call for 20, 30 minutes and just ask them questions around brands, ask them questions around industries to sort of get their pain points, because if it's a creator's pain point, it's likely that their audience are having the same concerns and the same issues. So we can leverage that, get fantastic insights, map that to our keyword research, and essentially start getting a roadmap of content that we know needs to be delivered because creators that are leading these platforms and leading these conversations are having these pain points. And then finally, there's the idea of audience surveys and interviews. Again, similar to those creator interviews, but instead of it being with a content creator, we're going straight to the audience. So we've done our social listening, we've looked at the comments, we've seen a pain point, but then we go and ask the audience directly. We maybe follow up via a DM and get to the real crux of the problem that they're facing and then deliver content on the back of that to help them. So this whole process goes back to the idea of being proactively reactive, which is a big sort of push point for us. If we're able to do that by social listening, audience surveys, creator interviews, and tie that back to our keyword research, we're able to create content that SEMrush and Ahrefs, they're not going to give you. Again, that took ages to click through. Okay, so you've heard me talk a lot there about creators and working with content creators as part of this process. So I thought, as we're developing that search everywhere strategy, it becomes important to understand the level of creator that you're going to work with. You've understood the platforms that you're working on, so all of a sudden you know where the creators need to be playing ball and where they need to be surfacing content. Let's just say it's TikTok, for example. So we know that it needs to be a TikTok creator. We know that it needs to be a TikTok creator that works within the fashion space. But what level of creator do you need to go and work with? Each level are going to surface sort of specific results and give you certain levels of results. So you need to understand what tier that means that you're going to work with. And that goes back to your benchmarking. So if we're looking to develop community and we're looking to grow our community, we could work with some of the people at the upper stage of our tier who are going to get that expansive reach and bring people into the fold. Or we could say that we're actually going to go for the emerging creators because they've got much more engaged community and they're going to bring engaged members of the community to our brand. So again, it depends what you're after. If you're looking for more people to engage with your content, go for the lower tiers. If you're looking for that sort of wide spanning reach and you're looking to just expose your brand to more people, you might go to the top tiers of this sort of pyramid. It's going to vary from brand to brand, from campaign to campaign, and from strategy to strategy. We've broke down what each stage is sort of good at and what we believe each stage of this journey is good at. There's nothing sort of groundbreaking here. It's leaning on what's widely sort of accepted and known. Take a look at this afterwards. But again, it's just to acknowledge that when you're looking to work with creators, you can't just go, I love Angry Ginge, I'm going to go work with Angry Ginge. We need to think strategically about the creators that we're working with, making sure that that ties into everything we've established within our Search Everywhere strategy beforehand. Okay. And then the result of that is that we start to emerge with a strategy. We've started to establish which channels we need to be playing ball on. We've established the types of content, the types of creators, what UGC could look like, the search journeys that our users are undertaking, who's playing ball in the space. All of this is started to emerge and we can now document a strategy. So typically we would undertake this as a slide deck. We would put that together, present that to our internal teams first, and then start to get to work with our strategists, which admittedly is just me at the moment, to say, okay, what does the strategy look like for this brand? What is the most important thing to deliver against that narrative that we established in benchmarking, and to deliver against the needs of their business goals and the strategic goals that we've established when we've done benchmarking. On the back of that, we emerge with a strategy, and I hope that sort of resonates and makes sense. So, in terms of an example, this is a really exciting one for us that we've been able to do in our infancy. We've done this process for Represent, and we discovered a £6 million opportunity on the back of this. So essentially what I've just gone through with you guys, we undertook that for Represent. We worked with the guys at Represent to deliver this sort of, this is what you should be doing, this is what your competitors are doing type of approach. And the result of that is that we've discovered an extra £500,000 in monthly revenue for that brand. And we're now looking to develop that search strategy to unlock that with Represent for FY25. So yeah, this can unlock sort of wide opportunities that you've maybe not considered before and that don't present themselves when you're doing those traditional search strategies that we've typically done in the past. And then we can discuss. So if anyone's got any questions, if anyone's got any thoughts or wants to bounce any ideas around, we've got sort of 5-10 minutes to sort of do that now. I'm just going to look at where we are time-wise. So yeah, we're right on where I expected us to be time-wise. So we can spend a good 5-10 minutes. Go get yourselves a drink, and we'll have a quick Q&A if you like, guys. So if anyone's got any questions, please pipe up. Let's look at the activities. Q&A. So you should be able to ask questions now, guys, in the Q&A activities section. And yeah, feel free to drop any in the chat message section or the in-call messages section as well. And let me know if that's all making sense. Next for TikTok, I think TikTok Shop is about to change the game. I know that way it's probably already started, but the idea that TikTok Shop is another Temu or is another Alibaba.com, I think that that's massively going to shift, because I think the idea of creating content on a TikTok, putting a shoppable link within that content and then being able to convert within the same platform is super powerful. So I think that we're going to see a shift where a lot of brands are going to start taking TikTok Shop seriously. TikTok Shop's product lineup is going to change from being a Temu, an Alibaba.com, and it's going to become much more sophisticated and probably align more with an Amazon. So that's what I think is next for TikTok. In terms of search functionality, I would love them to give us more insight into searches directly. I don't know how possible it is for them. I hope that they're working on that. But if they can start to give us search volumes, then that's going to change the game. Because at the moment, we're leaning on third-party tools only. And they're great. Some of them are really good. Some of them not so much. But because there's some that are really good and some that are really not good, it makes leaves questions about the validity of those volumes. Whereas if we get something specific from TikTok, that'd be great. Sanjay asks, as a traditional SEO, how easy do you think it is to apply optimization techniques and solutions to other platforms? That's a really good point. We're going to get into this, but I think it's super, super important to fail fast on other platforms. Google doesn't allow us to do this because essentially we can produce content, and although it would maybe get ranked within 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, however long it takes, we're typically looking after, in my experience, 8 weeks minimum, we're leaving it before we start to look at that content. So I think in terms of optimization on other platforms, it's that idea of failing fast, learning, okay, that video didn't resonate. What's the optimization look like? It looks like testing again with different keywords or different captions or different hooks. And that's what the optimization is going to be looking like on those platforms. It's going to vary platform to platform, but I'd say that that's specific for a YouTube short, a TikTok, and probably an Instagram as well. In terms of Pinterest and things like that, optimization can be quite difficult there, but you're still getting signals from your users on what works and what doesn't. So optimization, it's essentially do more of what works and less of what doesn't, right? So if you see something's working, follow that, pick up on that, and hopefully that comes out of your benchmarking and your SUA that you do before you do these strategies. So I hope that answers your question. If I hadn't answered your question, I apologise. Follow up and we can thrash that out, but yeah. That's a great question. I definitely think that certain industries are already lending themselves to this more than others. But if I was to say for a SaaS brand, I still think that there's opportunities there because there's FAQ opportunities, there's feature opportunities so that we can create content around the SaaS's specifically, wow, that was a mouthful. The SaaS's specific features versus their competitors, and we can call that out in search content versus a traditional blog doing that or as addressing that in a blog. What I would say as well is I've worked with SaaS brands in the past where that middle of the funnel opportunity, where users are comparing, I don't know, let's just say Photoshop to Canva to Sony's version. That becomes easier because we can work with content creators and essentially have content creators do that for us, or we can embrace UGC and really lean on UGC. And when users are celebrating our feature versus our competitors' feature, we can repost that on our socials. We can reward them, say thank you to that user that's generated that content, and then repurpose that as part of our blog that sits in the middle of the funnel. So I think for SaaS brands, there are opportunities there. You just have to find what they are really. But I do think it is better suited for e-commerce brands, absolutely. Hope that helps. Let's see where we're at time-wise. Yeah, so we've got a couple more minutes, guys. So drop me a couple more questions and then we'll get into the next section. There's some really good questions coming in, to be fair. I appreciate it. Don't realise how far back you sit when you go all the way over here. Okay, so I think that's it for questions. Before we move on, Adam's used the thumbs up, so if people can use the thumbs up or just drop a yes in the chat. Does that make sense? Is that something you can see yourselves undertaking within your brands, within your agencies, within your clients? Does that strategy and that approach make sense? Give me a thumbs up or drop me a yes. Or a no, obviously. Amazing, thank you guys. Okay, so I've drank a full bottle of water. Probably going to need to go to the loo before the end of this, but never mind. Let's get into the next section. So, discovering trends and understanding search everywhere and the role of trends within that search everywhere. We've now emerged with our strategy. We understand where we're playing ball. We understand the creators that we're partnering with, the types of content that we need to create. We've probably got a roadmap of keywords that are going to become briefs or the results of our interviews that are going to become content briefs. Now becomes the fun part, which is trends. So, again, that button don't want to work. We're now at this idea of proactive reactivity, fame mentions and links, and driving social sharing. And we're a little bit at that creator-led activations and UGC, but it's mainly these three in terms of our flywheel. Before we get into this, again, cheeky plug, I know I've had a couple here, excuse me. But we're about to launch Trend Talk, which is essentially a WhatsApp community where we're going to share regular updates. We're going to be able to collaborate as a group and as a community around what's trending, what's cool and trending, what could be a cool topic for fashion brands, for fitness brands. We're going to have separate spaces for each industry. So I think it's fashion, fitness, finance, food and drink, FMCG, and then fucking travel's the last one because they all had to start with an F. So they're the sort of categories that we're focusing on to start with. So if you find yourself within those niches or within those industries, follow the QR code. You can sign up to get early access. And yeah, hopefully we're going to grow a really fun community around the potential of trends and what they mean for our brands and our agencies. So yeah, let's talk trends. Trends are those emerging, they're exploding topics, they're at the forefront of our audience, okay? They're typically drove by our audience or content creators. And they're essentially those things that are driving discussion online. There's something that we can see our audiences are taking an interest in, they're taking a liking to, and therefore if we can create content effectively, effective content, and we can do so efficiently, they can assist us in doing something that our competitors aren't and essentially standing on our own as a brand. They're going to help us drive brand awareness, okay, because we know that our users are interested in that topic right now. So if we're serving content to them, it's going to put us at the forefront of their mind, generate that brand awareness as a result. It's going to grow that sense of community. So we've already explored how Gen Z millennial users, they're seeking to sort of come together as communities, be part of these brand conversations and these brand communities as a result. By talking about trends and talking about the stuff that they're passionate about right now, you're only going to grow that sense of community. You're going to encourage further conversation, encourage further UGC, and essentially grow your community as a result. And then finally, there's that idea of, again, everything has to come back to this, but communities and trends are able to drive revenue as a result. Because essentially, if you can put your brand at the heart of that trend as it emerges or as it's exploding, they're more likely to buy from you because you're making it easier for a user, for your audience to capitalise on that trend. Whether that's someone seeing a Love Islander wearing cowboy boots and all of a sudden they want to know what the best looks are for cowboy boots. That was a trend a couple of years ago. Whether it's a campaign by my previous agency around Squid Game, everybody looking for, I think it was white Vans or white Converse at the time, and then they call that out and say, here's your white Vans, get them from us. These trends emerge and it's the brands that put themselves at the heart of those conversations that benefit as a result. So how can we leverage trends? We're going to go through a few techniques over the next 10 minutes on how we can leverage trends related to search everywhere to essentially deliver on our strategic goals. The first is that we're going to create timely, trend relevant content. So we've got 2 points on the right that you can see. These are our key takeaways. These are what I would class as the key actions that you're going to want to take. The first is a proactive reactive strategy. So you've heard me talk about that throughout this deck. But essentially, if we can establish a sign-off process before trends start to emerge, so before we're creating content, before we're delivering our search everywhere strategy, this is going to ensure that we can react to trends efficiently. So we're not scrambling when a trend that we want to create content upon explodes. We already have our sign-off process. We already know who the key stakeholders and key decision makers are. We can brief, create, and get sign-off quickly and react quickly because speed is vital when it comes to talking about trends. Then, if we look at the tools, you've got things like Glimpse, which is my preferred sort of option. Google Trends, Glimpse lives on top of Google Trends, which is why I like it. And then you have got Exploding Topics and various other sort of trend insight tools that you can leverage. So what you can do here is you can get alerts on specific trends. So if there's a certain topic, a certain product that you want to monitor, you can set an alert, get an alert when that explodes, create content as a result. There are trend newsletters across industries as well, so look out for those. Look out for your niche newsletters, look out for your niche bloggers as well. They can be talking about stuff that is essentially going to be a trend. So it's essentially immersing yourself within those potential trend spaces and then reacting quickly and creating content on the back of that. The key here is that process to start off with, because the amount of times we've worked with brands in previous roles where that sign-off process is too long and we miss the trend, we miss the opportunity to be the first one into that conversation, has been staggering. So if you can establish that process before you start working together, whether it's with a brand in your immersion session at the start of a retainer, or if you are a brand side, establishing that now ahead of trends emerging, that'd be chef's kiss. No worries, Adam. Thank you, mate. I'll make sure you get the recording as well, mate. That fly's still doing my head. Optimize and repost existing content. So we've talked about keyword research. We've talked about mapping hashtags and all the things across social search platforms to those keywords. We can also start to map trends to those. So if we're tracking a specific trend, we can map that to those keywords so we know which keywords are vital to that trend. On the back of that, we then know which pieces of content we already have on our website, on our social platforms. And when a trend starts to explode, we can optimize it, including that trend time within the new piece of content or within the optimized piece of content, and we can share it. It's going to get new traffic because people are searching for that trend and searching for that wider topic. And it could lead to new improved rankings on a Google SERP or on our social SERPs as a result. Another opportunity is for us to repost content. So if something we've optimized already, our page is nicely optimized, but then it re-explodes or the trend continues to grow, we can just repost our existing content. We don't need to go out of our way to create new content. If it means that we're going to be able to react quickly, let's repost what we've already got. And then finally, there's that idea of repurposing content. So if you have a piece of content that performs really well for a keyword or an exploding trend on Google, why leave that to just Google? We've already established that the search universe is emerging. Let's take that blog content and let's repurpose that as a video. Let's see if we can work with a creator. Let's see if we can take our video contents, transcribe them and put them on a blog. The more we repurpose, the more we're extending the value of that piece of content and the more return on investment we get. So yeah, that's the process here in terms of optimizing and reposting our content with trends at the heart. Optimize, repost, repurpose. Yeah, and again, that proactive reactivity point, we need to prepare for recurring trends. So what we do is we'll track trends within Glimpse that we know are going to recur year on year. So for example, airport outfits is always going to pop off in summer. Summer co-ord sets is always going to pop off in summer. So again, it could be fitness trends around January. We know certain fitness trends are going to pop off in January. Finance trends tend to be when budgets get announced. So if we know that our budget's going to get announced at X, we'll start preparing for those recurring trends and looking at what content we need to create. So yeah, identify trends that you know could occur annually, could occur biannually or even monthly, and have your optimizations ready, have your new pieces of content ready or briefed, ready to create, and essentially have your finger on the pulse, ready to publish, go live, or publish your content live on the likes of a TikTok and Instagram or wherever you're playing ball. Historical data is available in tools like Glimpse that can be leveraged and we can start to predict, and Glimpse have started to give us forecast access to the growth line of trends now as well. So that can tell us when trends are likely to re-emerge. AI is a massive part of sort of forecasting that, and we can see where those developments are. And again, if we see that a forecast tells us that a trend line's going up, we can start to prepare so that as soon as that starts to hit its peak, we're delivering our content. We can partner SEO seasonality. So SEO's seasonality is not a new term. You get that from the likes of SEMrush, from the likes of Ahrefs, Google Keyword Planner, whatever it is. You typically know what seasonality is because it'll say the search volume's here, search volume's here. So seasonality, you want to be publishing it here. We can map that with trend data and we can understand essentially when's the best time to consider creation or optimization. And then finally, it's understanding alerts. So it's setting alerts for trends to say, actually, I think this is going to occur biannually. So let me set an alert so that when it starts to pop off, we can react. So again, that's possible within Glimpse. That's possible as a result of Deviation Trend Talk. So definitely join that community because we can send alerts within that. So yeah, prepare for recurring trends, proactive, reactive, and be ready to deliver the content needs of that trend. And this is sort of a little process around this. So essentially what we're looking to do here, I don't want to go into loads of detail on this, but we want to combine trends. We're looking to combine content and newsjacking as a technique. We're using trends to gain that media attention and potentially gain backlinks, because if something's trending, it's likely that niche publications especially are going to want to talk about that. There's an idea of collaborating with influencers to discuss those trending topics further and put our brand at the heart of that. And all of this allows us to amplify our messaging through multiple channels. Going back to that search universe point, can we create on a TikTok, a Reddit, a Pinterest, a YouTube, a Google, all at the same time? That's what proactive reactivity means. Hopefully, again, as you look through this process, it all starts to make sense. Again, just drop me some thumbs up if that process makes sense. If not, we can break it down, but I think that it's quite self-explanatory, to be fair. Give me some yeses in the chat or thumbs up. Thank you, Oscar. Amazing. Cheers, Greg. Thank you. Okay, cool. And then finally, there's the cool stuff. So this is where things really get exciting. It is very, not easy, but it's possible that your competitors can be doing the other stuff we've talked about. What's not as easy for them to do is to create or drive trends. So what we can do is we can research category level trends within Glimpse, within the trend tools that we're leveraging, and within our community. We can look at these category trends and we can find an in that's specific to our brand. So is it a product? Is it our service? What is the in for us as a fitness brand, a fashion brand, for us to capitalize on that category level trend? Once we've established that, it's then, okay, let's leverage creators. Let's try and drive user-generated content and get our users starting to grow this trend for us, and essentially leveraging that community that we've discussed about the importance of creating as part of search everywhere. And essentially, we make the trend all about us. If we do this, we're putting ourselves at the heart of a trend and we're growing that trend as a result, and we're essentially creating trends that are personal to our brand and that we've grown as our brand. Competitors can join that trend, but ultimately, we're the ones that have started it, so it's always going to benefit our visibility, always going to benefit us, because Gen Zs especially, but millennials too, they remember who was first to the dance and they're not going to let the competitors forget about it. So if someone misses the boat and joins a trend late, they'll get called out. If someone copies and tries to jump on our trend, they'll get called out. And ultimately, we'll be able to leverage the trend that we've created to benefit our search strategy. And the other way that you can do that is you can drive trends that are starting to emerge. Now, this is where the risk game comes into it, because you're essentially trying to capitalize on a trend well before it reaches its peak so that you're an early adopter of that emergent trends. Obviously, this could lead to a fact where you create content on a trend and then that trend dies dead within a week or within a day. And then all of a sudden you've invested money in content that is not trending and it's not going to have that long-term value. However, if you can do it on trends and if you can get really good at picking the trends that are going to explode and that are about to emerge through the forecasting and through your own knowledge of your industry, then you can start to drive trends on platforms like TikTok, like Pinterest is a really good one, and like YouTube as well. So yeah, creating trends is a really, really cool opportunity. It's something that we're really big on ourselves, because essentially it's the stuff that your competitor can't steal. It's the stuff that your competitor can't copy, and that makes it powerful. Come on, there we go. A few tips and tricks. So trend dashboards, monitoring trends related to your keyword universe within that sort of keyword template that I'm going to drop you all after this deck, or after this webinar, I should say. That's going to become essential. We can set alerts so that we're getting told about those trends. We can be part of those communities like Trend Talk to essentially have a strict sort of structure to how we are staying aware of what's trending. So my first tip or trick is create a trend dashboard and monitor trends that are related to your keyword universe. Leverage Reddit, leverage other forums. So spending time immersing yourself in what your community are getting up to on Reddit, that's going to help you uncover trends, because it's likely that they're going to get spoke about on platforms like Reddit at the early stages of them starting to emerge, and probably before tools like Glimpse are able to capitalize on them or start to leverage them. So I would say head to a Reddit, check what's popping off there, and then undertake a Glimpse search, and you'll probably be pleasantly surprised. UGC and EGC. So EGC is probably a big one here as well for a lot of brands. But essentially, your audience are going to have the finger on the pulse. Content creators, but also just UGC creators, they are at the forefront of trends because they're the ones that are creating them. They're the ones that are driving them forward. So if you can look to UGC, look to what's happening on a TikTok within your community, within your industry, you can then leverage that before they fully explode. And then the EGC point, your employees, if they're passionate about the industry that they're working, they're passionate about their work, and they're passionate about the industry, I think I just said that, but never mind, they're likely to have their finger on the pulse as well. And you've already got an in to speak to them. So speak to your employees, speak to your teams, and see if they can create content to start driving these conversations as well. EGC is a really powerful, underutilized sort of content strategy that we're hoping to leverage over the next 12 months, and I know is starting to explode across the search space. Essentially, what I'm getting at here and what we need to start thinking of as SEOs is we treat keywords strategically. We always have. We now need to start treating trends strategically, because the brands that do are the ones that are going to have success. It's no longer enough to just stumble across a trend, create or optimize content, and it be a happy coincidence. We need to be essentially developing trend strategies, because these are what are going to set us apart against the brands that are just relying on SEMrush keyword data and Ahrefs keyword data. That's not going to give them the trend insights at the opportune time. Treating trends strategically will. So hopefully that's got you thinking. And if it has, you're going to love our next webinar. So this is going to become a monthly thing. August shits out because I'm on a holiday. But September, early September, when the kids are back at school, we're going to do a webinar all about things on Glimpse, Google Trends, how to use them for search marketing. So whereas this has been very ideologic and me talking about what we're doing and how we see search evolving, this webinar is going to be very action-based. So I'm going to be taking you through Glimpse and going through our processes and our frameworks of how we actually get to a piece of content or a brief at the end. So there's more details to follow. Definitely keep in touch and check your inboxes on these sort of things. But yeah, there will be no mention of fidget spinners, I promise. But yeah, hopefully that's got you thinking. Okay then, final section, and then we're going to go into another Q&A. Trends and search everywhere. Hopefully that's all got you excited. Drop me a thumbs up. Drop me a yes in the chat before we move on. Hopefully we're all good. Does that all make sense in terms of how we can leverage trends? Drop me a thumbs up. Oh, no thumbs up this time. There we go. Cheers, Greg. Thank you. Good stuff. Okay, so final part. It's very easy to talk about creating a strategy and going through this ideologic view of what search everywhere looks like. But ultimately, we need to be able to evidence value to a CMO. We need to be able to justify the investment, which, as I've said, is probably going to be more than what's required to do traditional SEO. So we need to be able to say, did this deliver? And that comes down to our data, our analytics, and our measurement. Now, I don't want to get into the crux of specific KPIs beyond the one that I'm going to touch on specifically, because I think KPIs can vary industry to industry, brand to brand, strategy to strategy. So obviously, if there's a KPI that's very important to your CMO that you're working with or the brand that you're working with, tracking that and showing success on that is going to be vital. But hopefully, what we can see is that we're going to focus on these two elements of the strategy now. So we're looking at reporting and how that can feed into our next analysis and our next benchmarking. It is really a time of rest in peace attribution. There's cookie changes, there's tracking changes, there's privacy laws, GDPR, and all of this stuff that's happening. There's users developing ad blocker and using ad blockers in their browsers. There's people taking a Google search on their laptops, but then looking at TikToks on their phones, multi-device journeys. There's multiple touch points on those journeys. There's various applications. There's the emergence of zero-click searches and how AI is going to play into that conversation. So ultimately, what we have is we have a situation where attribution is not going to work moving forward. It's not going to be accurate moving forward for us. So we need to find alternatives to what has historically worked in terms of attribution. So Rand Fishkin did a really good job of sort of going through this in a recent LinkedIn post. So I'm going to steal a little bit from Rand here, but I did want to credit him before we went into this. Obviously, SparkToro did this analysis a couple of months back, I think it was, in terms of who is sending traffic to websites on the web. And unanimously, it's Google. Okay? So in terms of where traffic's coming from, it's coming from Google. But where are people actually spending their time? Well, they're not spending the time on a Google SERP. A Google SERP, before you get to the content, it's a boring space to be. You don't want to be on there any longer than finding your piece of content, clicking the blue link and moving on. So users are actually spending their time on social, they're on video, they're within the various apps, they're on news websites, they're on X looking at news or wherever they're getting their news from now that X is starting to go downhill. They're on these platforms. They're not on search as much. As you can see, search is only 10% of the space. So our brands are discovered via search everywhere activations because users are spending more time on social, they're spending more time engaging with video. We're then inspiring them, and ideally we're expecting a brand search when a user is ready to convert. So they're going to these places like an Amazon, they're going to these places like a Google, like a TikTok shop. After engaging with our platforms where they're spending their time on TikTok, wherever it is, we need to be able to sort of justify what's going on these platforms with our brand search. So it's, can we show a lift on Amazon in brand search? Can we show a lift on Google with brand search? And can we do the same on the emerging TikTok shop? If we can, then instead of attribution becoming our measure of success, measurement of what we're doing becomes our measurement of success, which is much more effective, given that attribution is starting to fail. So the shift means that share of search needs to become the predominant sort of metric, if you like, and it's the one that we lean on in terms of showing the result of our social search activations and showing the result of what we're doing within our search everywhere strategy. Ultimately, if all of those pieces of content that we create across the search universe lead to a significant increase in brand term search volume and our share of search versus our competitors, that is something that we can measure and that is something that we can report on. That is a good indicator of success. Then we lean on things like revenue and we lean on things like brand awareness and all this other cool stuff that's probably still important. But at the foundation, it's share of search. So I wanted to touch on that ever so slightly to just sort of say, let's lean on share of search, which for those wondering is the volume of search queries for a brand or for a creator as a proportion of all the search queries for all of the brands within that competitive landscape. So if we're able to assess our share of search, see that increase, it's an idea that measurement's working. Essentially, we can focus on what you can measure and analyse as you look for successes. So we mentioned earlier in the Q&A, fail fast. So by measuring and analysing your strategy regularly, we can look to fail fast. We can delete what doesn't work, do more of what does, less of what doesn't. Proactively reacting to the stuff that we're seeing across the landscape. The idea of repeat what works. So don't go away from something if it works. Don't just think that you've done it so then you can't do it again. If something works, lean on it. So, for example, if we see that webinars start to have the desired outcome that we've set for what we want from them, we'll do more webinars. If they don't start to have that outcome, we can just do less webinars, and maybe it's more podcasts, maybe it's more LinkedIn posts. So we're doing more of what works, less of what doesn't for our brand. And then, yeah, it's about focusing on uplifts. So whether it's share of search or whether it's the KPIs that are important to your CMOs at your specific brands or agencies, the focus needs to be on being responsible, driving an uplift in that area, linking that to our strategic goals, linking that to our business goals from right at the beginning of this talk, and essentially showing success in that way. So yeah, I've gone through all of those now. And yeah, that's all in terms of the webinar. Before we drop off, obviously, I'd love to know if we demanded attention while it's fresh in your mind. So take a look at this QR code. It'll take you to a Google form. Next month it won't work because the Google URLs are getting removed, but for now it does. So take a look on that form. We'd appreciate any feedback there. And then I think we're at the discussion stage again. So before we head off, on those last two sections, if there's any questions, any thoughts, any thinking, I'd love to help you out and answer any questions or thought processes there. So again, drop them in the chat. Drop me a thumbs up if that worked and you understood the share of search element. But yeah, definitely drop me a question in the chat if you've got one, and we'll answer your questions. This is second bottle of water, by the way. I had 3 next to me. And yes, we're starting to need the loo. Any questions? Any thumbs up for me? Did we find that valuable? Is that insightful? I hope it was. As I say, it's tough when I'm starting to build these decks because I feel like I could talk about this for hours. So speaking or picking the specific stuff that we're going to talk about is really tough. Okay, so I'm going to move on. If there is any questions, I'll come back to them in a second. But shameless plugs have been throughout this deck, so we might as well reiterate them. Trend Talk, visit the QR code, sign up for early access. It's going to be a WhatsApp community. We're going to talk regular updates on trends. We're going to collaborate on when we should be reacting to them and highlighting them. And again, it's that idea of creating proactive reactivity for our community. So if that sounds good, definitely drop a follow onto that link or a phone number onto that link. The next webinar is going to be on Glimpse and social and Google Trends, how to use Glimpse for search marketing. It's going to be taking place on Thursday, the 5th of September. It's going to be between 10 and 12, slightly longer so that we can go at the specifics a little bit more. There's going to be more details to follow, so definitely keep an update on the Deviation socials, my socials, and we'll go from there. Yeah, a little bit of a plug again. We're the Search Everywhere agency. We specialise in this stuff. So if you'd like to work with us for your brand, definitely reach out. We nail this. I'd like to think that we're the best in the game at this. So definitely reach out and we'd love to work with your brand. And then, yeah, follow me. LinkedIn's probably the place where I'm most active. Ashley Liddell SEO. I produce regular pieces of content on LinkedIn. The same across Twitter. If you want to have a chat, Twitter's probably a good place to go. And then, yeah, across socials, it's We Are Deviation. So definitely check out our sort of business pages across TikTok, Instagram, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and YouTube as well. We've gone through that one. And that is us.